Good afternoon, everyone. We are back again with another insightful session from our experts today. I welcome you all to today's session or today's webinar on from platform adoption to workforce control. Why HR technology success in 2026, depending on not just on execution, but not just on deployment. Once again, thank you all for joining us today. Over the last decade, organizations have heavily invested in HR platforms across core HR, payroll, workforce management, analytics, and employee experience. While these investments have improved visibility and standardization, many HR leaders still face challenges in achieving consistent workforce control across day to day operations. Well, this year, the challenge is no longer about adoption of technologies of in HR. It's about ensuring that technology translates into predictable outcomes around workforce productivity, compliance, cost control, and operational consistency. In today's research led session, we'll explore why platform adoption alone is not enough, where execution gaps continue to exist, and what CHROs must prioritize to align HR strategy, technology, and workforce outcomes to make it more efficient. Well, I'm pleased to introduce our speakers today. Sanjeev C. Ramachandran, Associate Vice President and Lead Analyst here at QKS Group. Along with him, we have Sriraj Amritraj, Principal Analyst for HCM. Well, together they will share practical insights on how organizations can move beyond HR technology deployment and build stronger workforce control in 2026. We encourage all the attendees that we have today to raise any queries that you may have throughout the session in the Q&A section below, and we'll surely address them towards the end of the session. We have a lot lined up for you, and stay tuned and stay excited. With that, let's get started, and over to you, Sanjeevi.
Thank you, Anish, and good day, everyone. So Anish introduced us really well, and moving into the title. So over the last decade, organizations have actually invested very heavily in HR technologies, whether it is their payroll systems or workforce management solutions, anything related to employee experience. And now it's gone to a different level in terms of analytics platforms and AI-enabled capabilities, right? And so because of all these investments, today organizations have more visibility, workforce visibility, than they would have actually had a couple of years ago. So now the business leaders or the HR leaders can actually monitor the workforce trends. They can track payroll performance, measure the engagement, and they get access to almost all the information instantly. That's why you have these dashboards, reports, and multi-device compatibility. And still, whatever discussions that we are having with HR leaders from across industries, right? They sound really very similar. Their payroll teams are still correcting errors, and their managers are still chasing approvals. HR operations teams are still reconciling information across systems. Complaints teams, again, they still keep validating data and process. And to put it across in the same words as I heard from a HR leader, he told me that, Sanjeevi, everything is automated right up until something important happens. Okay. And I'm sure that many of the people who's part of this call can relate to that. And there is a big shift in conversation now. Earlier, people were more focused on implementation. Now everybody wants their money's worth, right? They're all now focused on outcomes. Organizations are very right when they are now asking um, whether an investment I have made from the technology perspective is helping them manage their workforce costs effectively. Is it helping them to improve compliance, reduce operational effort, and execute workforce decisions with much more confidence than what they had earlier before the technology investments? And this is the place where the idea of workforce control comes in. It's not about controlling employees, it's about controlling outcomes. And this is a very relevant topic at this point in time because, as we all know, AI is now the talk of the market, and the market is heavily focused on AI. Every single vendor says they have an AI strategy. Every platform has AI capabilities, and AI is only as good as the processes, data, and workflows that runs behind it, right? So if the environment itself is fragmented or the data is not clean and there is quite an amount of manual intervention required, AI tends to amplify these realities rather than eliminate them, right? And this is one of the reasons why workforce controls continues to be a very important topic of discussion for HR leaders. So over the next hour, we are going to talk to you about what buyers are telling us, because QKS Group has got a very tightly knit end user community who rely on us for technology investment decisions. And we'll tell you where organizations are seeing value and where we see challenges existing at this point in time, and how the market in itself is evolving from visibility and intelligence towards execution and workforce control. Like I said earlier, from implementation to outcomes, right? And with that, let's get started. So, agenda, I'll just quickly walk through how we have structured the session, and we are going to explore a specific question that keeps coming up in our conversation with the HR leaders. So how do I mean, when I say I, an organization is asking a question, how do I move from deploying HR technology to achieving workforce control, right? Because most of these organizations have already invested very heavily in HR platforms and employee experience solutions, analytics, and AI. In their mind and in reality, the technology is largely in place. Okay, and now we move into another scenario or other part of the same scenario. We are hearing a totally different conversation. On one side, people, after all the investment, are sure that the technology is largely in place, and on the other side, the conversation is has moved out of technology because technology is already in place. So the conversation is now more focused on the outcomes, consistency, execution, and how is it going to benefit my organization. I mean, uh, that is where we are going to start with insights from roughly about 350 HR and payroll technology buyers. So the feedback that they've given us, given QKS Group, a very useful view on where the organizations are seeing value, where the expectations are actually challenging, and what are the actual challenges that still continues to exist, right? And then once that is done, we will explore the theme in terms of visibility and control not being the same thing, because visibility is not control. Visibility enables control. So we will see how that works. And a lot of organizations actually see workforce issues much more clearly than before. Okay, because they've done the technology investments, and but the issue here is that not being able to resolve these workforce issues consistently, and that's a different matter altogether. And we will also discuss why workforce operations continue to feel very manual despite the companies having invested in automation. And again, to quote an HR leader to whom I spoke to, the gentleman actually said, Sanjeevi, the workflows are automated, and the exceptions in my company still have full-time jobs, right? And after that, let's look at the relationship between HR strategy, operational execution, and technology. And from there, we will move into much deeper areas in terms of AI, automation, and workflows control. We will look at it from the perspectives of what organizations are actually achieving today, and where the values are being expected by value is being expected by the organization in the future. And we will also discuss workforce control maturity and how it can be assessed by the organizations. And the last point in the agenda would be in terms of us giving practical recommendations for the HR leaders based on the trends, the interactions that we have had with the organizations in the market and what we've been seeing across the market, right? And end of the session, we are sincerely hoping that we will be able to give you a clearer view of where workforce technology is creating value for you as an organization, and what are the major operational gaps that exist, and how do um, how can you transition from visibility to execution and ultimately to workforce control. With that, let me hand it over to Sriraj to begin with what we call the HR technology paradox.
Thanks, Sanjeevi, for that introduction and setting up the pace for this webinar. So now let's start with what we call the HR technology paradox. So when we look at the HR technology market today, it is easy to conclude that these organizations have made tremendous progress. So see, over the last decade, the companies have, as you said, the companies have invested heavily in the modern HR platforms, and many have moved from these legacy systems to these manual processes. So they have implemented cloud-based HR systems, payroll platforms, workforce management tools, employee experience solutions, and analytics capabilities. So compared to where the market was 10 years ago, there is no doubt that these organizations have significantly improved their HR technology landscape. In fact, if we look at this most large organizations today, they have better visibility into their workforce than ever before. Like they can see employee information in real time. They can monitor workforce costs more effectively. They can generate reports within minutes instead of days. On the surface, it actually looks like the HR technology problem has been solved, right? But when we start speaking to CHROs or HR operation leaders or payroll managers, it's actually a very different picture that emerges. You know, despite all these investments, organizations continue to face these the recurring operational challenges. So payroll teams still spend time correcting errors before payroll is finalized, and HR teams still manually reconcile information between systems. Managers still struggle with delayed approvals. So workforce planning, this the workforce planning teams, often work with data from multiple sources because they do not fully trust a single system of record, right? So the obvious question becomes, if organizations have already invested in modern HR technology, why are these challenges still present? So this is the actual paradox, and the technology adoption is also very high. Yet workforce control remains very difficult. And when we say workforce control, we mean the ability to consistently achieve the workforce outcomes the organization expects, right? For example, let's imagine, you know, a global organization using a leading HR platform such as Workday or SAP Success Factors. Employee data is stored digitally, payroll is automated, approvals are configured, reports are also available. Everything appears to be working as designed. However, when payroll processing begins, the payroll team discovers that the employee data has not been updated correctly for a group of employees. Now somebody has to investigate the issue. Somebody has to contact the managers. Someone has to validate the information. Someone has to manually correct the records before the payroll can be processed accurately, right? So the technology is actually working, but the operation still depends on people to stabilize the process. So this is something we hear repeatedly from the organizations. The actual challenge is not always that the technology is broken. The challenge is that the workforce operations are often more complex than the workflows configured within the technology. So as the organizations grow, they introduce multiple countries, the multiple business unit, different compliance requirements, different workforce models, acquisitions, restructuring, and much more. So the complexity of the workforce increases faster than the technology environment can adapt. So as a result, the organizations often find themselves in a situation where they have strong visibility but inconsistent execution. So they know where the problems are, they can see the issues quickly, but resolving those issues still requires significant manual effort. So this is why we believe the next phase of HR transformation is actually fundamentally different from the last phase, because the last decade focused on digitization and visibility. The next decade will focus on execution and control. So the key question here is: do we have the right HR technology? So the challenge here will continue to explore throughout today's discussion. But now, before we dive deeper into the workforce control, let's look at what buyers themselves are telling us through our VOC research and the trends we are seeing across the market. So now that we have discussed in the HR technology paradox, let's look at what buyers themselves are telling us. At QKS Group, we recently analyzed feedback from actually 342 HR and payroll technology buyers through our VOC research, and that includes CHRO, VP of talent acquisition, payroll managers, and more. So, for one of the reasons we believe this data is important is because it allows us to move beyond the assumptions and understand what organizations are actually experiencing in their day-to-day operations. And when we looked at the responses, a few very clear themes started to emerge. Like the first and perhaps the most important findings was that 80, 68% of respondents identified fragmented purpose. So your mic is. Okay. So the important finding was that 68% of respondents identified fragmented workforce data as a major operational challenge. Now, this is interesting because the most organizations already have modern HR systems, and many have invested heavily in digitization. Many have cloud-based platforms, and yet data fragmentation continues to be one of the biggest barriers to operational efficiency. So, why does this happen? Because workforce data rarely lives in a single system. Employee information may sit in a core HR platform, but the time and attendance may sit elsewhere. Payroll information may be managed through a different platform. Finance teams may have their own systems. Learning and talent management data may be stored separately. So as a result, these organizations often spend significant effort reconciling information instead of acting on it. So even though the data exists, it is not always connected in a way that supports smooth execution. And the second finding was that 61% of respondents consider integration with finance and workforce planning system as a critical evaluation criteria. So this tells us something very important. Like these organizations are no longer evaluating HR technology as a standalone application. They are evaluating how well it fits into the broader enterprise ecosystem. A payroll platform is no longer just a payroll platform. A workforce management solution is no longer just a workforce management solution. The expectation today is that these systems should work together and provide a consistent view of the workforce across the organization. Because if HR, payroll, finance, and workforce planning teams are all looking at different versions of reality, and decision making becomes very difficult. The third finding is particularly relevant given the amount of discussion happening around the AI today, is that 57% of respondents believe AI capabilities have not yet delivered measurable operational outcomes. So this does not mean organizations are against the AI. In fact, most organizations are actively exploring AI. The issue is that expectations have changed. A few years ago, simply having AI capabilities was seen as innovative. Today, buyers are asking much tougher questions. Like they actually want to know: has AI reduced manual effort? Has it improved accuracy? Has it helped us achieve measurable business outcomes? So, if the answer is no, then the AI capabilities is often viewed as interesting but not essential. And finally, this 38% of respondents told us they evaluate vendors based on measurable ROI and operational impact. Again, this shows us, how buyers' priorities are evolving. So, uh, the focus is on whether technology is helping them achieve predictable and consistent workforce outcomes. And that brings us to the next question. If organizations are investing heavily in technology, why are so many still reconsidering their existing platforms and evaluating replacements? So, Sanjeevi, you can take that.
Thank you, Sriraj. So it was very good information that you have shared, and realistic information from the market in terms of our analysis of 342 vendors from this users from this perspective. So thank you very much, and I'm sure that these findings actually highlight a lot of HR leaders are experiencing today, right? Because organizations, like we've been repeating again and again, have been investing in HR technology primarily for what reason? They want to simplify their process, improve efficiency, and make sure that the employee experience gets better, and make sure that they are able to build more data-driven HR functions. So dashboards, reports, and real-time insights are available for them. And in a lot of cases, these investments have been successful. The primary change, the way the market is looking at the success, is now slightly different. Okay, now the market or the organizations want to know how the success is measured. So earlier, I would say a couple of years ago, a decade ago, if there is a project, a technology project that is commissioned, the success or the progress was calculated based on the implementation milestones. When did the project go live? How did the data migration happen? Was it successful? Is adoption on track? And whether the delivery milestones have been met, the parameters of time, cost, and quality have been aligned with. Okay, but today it's slightly different. So the HR leaders or the organization leaders now want to know, yes, I have invested in this implementation. What am I getting? Is it reducing my effort? Is it helping? Is this investment helping me improve my decision making? Am I getting better at compliance? What is the kind of business value that I get, which is measurable, right? And this is exactly the kind of market that we need to have. This is a mature market. And this mature market talks about outcomes. It's not about no more about technology adoption. They focus on business outcomes, and compliance will be a fantastic example, because in various forums and summits and discussion, when we have this discussion with the HR and payroll leaders, right? They are not focused on whether a platform is able to support a specific regulation. They've moved beyond that. They are actually asking, can I trust this process? Can I trust the data? The outcome that comes out of this platform, can I trust that? And this is a completely very different expectation from a mature market. And the leaders want operational consistency. Because as we know, a lot of organizations have global platforms, right? But it does not necessarily translate into globally consistent operations. They end up having different workflows, different approval structures. There are different levels of automation. And over a period of time, these leaders actually realize that a common system is not automatically serving the purpose or creating a common operating goal. And another classic example will be payroll transformation, where this issue is actually very visible, that there is no common operating model, right? Organizations actually um, want to modernize and successfully modernize as well their payroll, and they end up automating large parts of the payroll process. Over a period of time, say 6 months, then they realize that the payroll team is still spending the same amount of time managing exceptions, validating data, and coordinating across multiple departments and multiple stakeholders. And so rather than explaining it more, I'll just tell you what one of these payroll leaders told us, he clearly said, we have automated payroll and it is helping us. But what actually takes our time is the preparation that we do before every payroll. That is what is keeping us busy, right? And I'm sure some of you are smiling at this comment when this gentleman said we have automated payroll, but it is everything that needs to be done before payroll is what is keeping us busy, because this is where workforce control actually starts becoming important, right? Not, I mean, implementation is a different story. And when the organizations reach the point where they start asking whether the operation is becoming easier to run, is it more predictable and less dependent on manual effort, right? In the end, that's what the leaders are looking for. What the leaders are looking for is, one, in terms of good consistency or greater consistency, reduced risk, reduced operational effort. And in terms of workforce operations, they would like to have more confidence and trust. And which actually brings us to the next part of the discussion. Now that we are talking about a mature market where organizations are actually focused on outcomes, what is the kind of role that they would expect AI to play in helping achieve them, in helping achieving them? So moving to the next slide, where we talk about what is the expectation of buyers from AI. We will. So we are actually getting into a territory where everybody knows something about, right? AI. And this is the most discussed topic when it comes to HR technology today. Irrespective of whatever conference we attend, any vendor event that we become a part of, and any industry report that comes out, AI is at the center of almost every conversation. I'm repeating this, every vendor is talking about AI, right? But we do not know whether it is AI, whether the platform is AI integrated, AI enabled, AI powered, AI engineered. So we don't know that, right? So every vendor talks about AI, every platform is launching AI capabilities, every organization is exploring an AI use case, right? And when you look beyond the marketing and actually listen to what buyers are actually saying, the conversation moves into a much more practical territory. The very important finding from our research is that is very simple. Buyers are no longer considering AI as valuable only because of its presence. They're very clear. In fact, most of the HR leaders are actually asking a very straightforward question: what problem is this so-called AI solving for me? And that's exactly the right question. That's the sign of a mature market. Because every major technology wave follows a similar pattern. First, organizations get excited about the technology. Then they want to understand, explore more in terms of how it works. And over a period of time, they stop caring about the technology itself and start focusing on outcomes. AI has thankfully now entered that phase. Organizations actually want to know, can AI help me reduce manual effort? Can it help me reduce decision making? Can it reduce risk? Can it improve productivity? Can there are so many cans in terms of questions, right? And perhaps most importantly, very importantly, the question is, can AI create measurable business value? So that is the question from a mature market. Now, to start with a simple example, as an employee, if I ask a chatbot, what is my leave balance? And I get an instant answer, yes, that is useful. But if the same AI can check policies, route approvals, update schedules, and completes the process automatically, then we are talking operational value. This is the difference between information and execution, and the same applies to payroll. So organizations have stopped looking for more and more reports telling them that, yes, it is a payroll anomaly, right? So organizations now want to know, what is the root cause? What should be the next best recommended action for me? And uh, how do I reduce the effort required to resolve this issue, the payroll anomaly, right? And that's where much of the market has got a lot of work left to do. And again, I'm going to quote a CHRO of a very reputed organization who told me that I don't need another AI. I mean, AI to write another summary. I need AI to help me close the ticket. And I'm sure most of you who's part of this call will be able to relate to this. But this is what, and this is why we are seeing the market move from AI as an information tool to AI as an operational capability, right? Whether it is a large vendor, mid-sized vendor, small vendor, or emerging vendors or aspirants, as we put in QKS language, whether they're aspirants, contenders, strong contenders, or leaders, the common direction is very clear. The focus has actually shifted and very swiftly shifting from helping people find information to helping people get the work done. And that's where the real value of AI is created, because organizations are investing in AI because they want better outcomes. After all, AI is a technology, right? Unless there is a specific outcome, technology itself does not carry any value, right? So they're looking for better outcomes. When I say better outcomes in terms of lesser errors and faster decisions, in terms of operational effort, reduced operational effort, and more confidence in terms of workforce operations. So when we think about AI in HR, the most important question is, how is this AI helping me improve workforce outcomes? I'm repeating one of the earlier statements I made. People don't care whether a platform has got AI anymore. The market now, the organizations and the leaders now want to know, fine, you have AI in your platform. How is this AI, the presence of AI in your platform, going to help me improve workforce outcomes, right? And that gets us to the next part of the discussion. And we will move to outcomes eventually. But before that, let's look at how HR technology landscape has improved workforce visibility, and why visibility alone is not going to help the organization. That need to translate into control. And over to Sriraj.
Thank you, Sanjeevi. Okay. So before we
Siraj, I believe you might be on mute.
sorry, I'm sorry. Okay. So I think it's important to first look at how how much progress the industry has already made. So if we go back 10 or 15 years, most HR teams were working with spreadsheets, emails, and multiple disconnected systems, like Sanjeevi already mentioned. So getting a simple workforce report could actually take days. So payroll teams spend actually a lot of time collecting and validating data from different sources, and managers often had very limited visibility into their workforce information. Today, actually, the situation is completely different. This most organizations have modern HR platforms that provide centralized employee data, real-time insights, self-service capabilities that we will say SS and ESS, and much better visibility across organizations. So in many ways, the industry has done a very good job in actually solving the visibility challenge here. And that's important actually, because you cannot manage what you cannot see, right? And also you cannot improve what you cannot measure. So, however, this is where we need to understand one important difference, because visibility and control are not the same thing. So, let me give you a simple example. Like when you drive a car, the dashboard shows your speed, fuel level, engine status, and warning indicators. So, this gives you visibility. But if the engine warning light comes in, the dashboard itself doesn't solve the problem, because somebody still needs to take action and fix it, right? So the same thing is happening in HR today. Our systems can tell us that attrition is increasing, They can tell us that overtime costs are going up. They can tell us that engagement scores are dropping or compliance risks are increasing. But the real question is what happens after that? Can managers take action quickly? Can HR teams respond effectively? Can the organization solve the issue before it becomes a bigger problem? If the answer is no, then we have visibility, but we don't have control. And this is exactly what we are seeing across the market today. So organizations have become very good at identifying the workforce issues. The next challenge is improving how they respond to those issues consistently and at scale. So the first phase of HR transformation was digitization. The second phase was visibility. Now we are entering the third phase, which is workforce control. So the focus is no longer just on knowing what is happening. The focus is on taking the right action and achieving better workforce outcomes. So that brings us to the next discussion. Anish, to the next slide, please.
Yeah.
Okay. So now that we have seen how HR technology has improved workforce visibility, we can move on to the what workforce control means. I think
I will take that, Sriraj. So the point that you made was extremely important because today organizations have better visibility than, like you said, 5 or 10 years ago. Because visibility alone is never going to guarantee outcomes. When we talk about workforce control, we need what we exactly mean, because it means different things to different leaders. A payroll leader will see workforce control as payroll accuracy and compliance. An HR operations leader will it will mean totally different thing to him or her, which means reducing manual effort and improving process consistency. And for a CHRO, it's even broader, right? It's about having confidence that workforce strategies and decisions are being executed consistently across the organization. And one of the biggest lessons organizations learned during digital transformation is that collecting data is easier, very, very easy, than changing the behavior, right? Technology can only do so much. Technology can tell us what is happening, and people, process, and operating models are the ones that's going to determine what happens next, which is why a lot of organizations have got world-class visibility, but in terms of execution, they still struggle, right? And technology is only going to um, um, uh, help you identify issues quickly. So keeping this in mind, at QKS Group, we view workforce control through four key dimensions: cost control, which is actually the ability to understand, manage, and influence workforce spending and prevent it from becoming a budget issue. That's what it is. The second one is compliance control, to be able to align, to be compliant, uh, and operate confidently across multiple countries, regulations, and workforce models. The third is productivity control, and the fourth is operational consistency. Because let me be honest here, process have never been an issue for the organizations. It's only that an organization operating in multiple locations, right? Each of these locations have found its own slightly better way of following the same process. And if we bring this, and when we bring these four dimensions together, which is workforce, which is what we discussed just now in terms of cost control, compliance control, productivity control, and operational consistency, workforce control actually becomes better and goes beyond dashboards, reports, or visibility. And it helps us result in predictable workforce outcomes with confidence. And that is going to be the key phrase here: predictable workforce outcomes. Because nobody invests in technology to create colorful reports, right? It's about the investment is all about getting confidence. They want confidence, they invest more in technology. They want confidence in terms of payroll running accurately, in terms of complaints obligations being met, in terms of workforce costs being under control. And yes, and they need to be sure that the workforce decisions are being executed consistently across the organization. Once we understand workforce control in this way, there's only one question left. So how will the organizations achieve it? I'm going to talk to you about the framework that we usually use to evaluate, or a proven, usually was not the word, a proven framework that we have used to evaluate workforce control and those dimensions that would support it, right? So before that, let's try and address a question every HR leader can relate to. Okay. If organizations have invested in modern HR technology, self-service capabilities or workflow automation and digital transformation initiatives, why is there a lot of manual execution happening when it comes to this HR as a domain? Because this is one of those very common frustrations we hear from a lot of HR leaders, right? And the platforms are very good in handling standard processes, and the challenges come only when these workforce operations follow the standard process. Let's take a very simple example. Employee onboarding, it looks very clean on paper. An employee joins, formalities are completed, documents are collected, payroll updated, access is provision, and the employee starts work. It's a very straight forward process, right? The workflow looks clean, and platforms are designed for this. The best, perfect, and efficiency is going to be at a very different level, higher level, right? But in terms of reality, the manager who's supposed to approve or authorize the onboarding of this employee submits the information late or on leave, or a complaints document goes missing. Access that need to be provided by the IT department has been delayed, and the payroll cutoff date has passed. And all of a sudden, right, a very highly automated, straightforward, simple process will end up having multiple calls, meetings, and manual interventions. This is an execution problem. There is no point blaming technology for this. And it is the same thing that we see with approvals, local process variations, data quality issues, and cross-functional coordination. Because when we talk about workforce, right, it does not belong to one team. Workforce does not belong to one team. It is spread across. It's cross-functional. You have HR, you have payroll, you have finance, you have managers getting involved, and there is an handoff at every single stage. And that creates an opportunity for delay. Rather than me trying to explain it further, let me put it in the words of a HR leader. Clearly said, our workflows are automated, Sanjeevi, our exceptions are not automated. And the exceptions are the place where most of the effort goes. And automation definitely does not eliminate complexity. It only changes the place where the complexity shows up, right? And organizations who gets higher levels of workforce controls are the ones who manages this complexity better, where the processes are standardized, unnecessary variations are reduced, data quality is good. Because in the end, workforce control is about reducing the amount of human effort required to keep these operations, workforce operations, running smoothly. So now let's look at why payroll and compliance processes would need a significant amount of human intervention, despite the organizations investing heavily. So moving to the next slide, where we're going to talk about why payroll and compliance will still require human intervention. Taking the discussion one step further, one of the common assumptions in the market is...
Sanjeev, I just sorry to interrupt. I just want to bring our audience on the same page. I hope we are discussing about when organizations.
The common assumption is that the payroll and compliance should be fully automated. because payroll technology has been around for decades and the organizations have invested very heavily. And the question, naturally, the question comes, right? So, why are you spending so much time, payroll and compliance teams? Why are you spending so much time validating information and resolving issues? And the answer is very straightforward, clear. Payroll and compliance teams are actually operating in an environment where exceptions are normal. Let's take an example. If an employee receives a promotion in the middle of a payroll cycle, the overtime is approved after payroll cutoff. Tax information changes at the last minute. A bonus calculation changes after payroll preparation has already started. And none of these situations indicates that the payroll system has failed. This means that the reality has entered the process, the real life has entered the process. And each of these situations require somebody to review, validate, and intervene and approve before payroll can be finalized. Again, I'm gonna
Sanjeev, I just also want to add something on
sure,
this.
sure.
It's like now before I continue, I just want to make it clear, like some level of process standardization is absolutely necessary. Like in fact, one of the biggest benefits of implementing modern HR platforms is the opportunity to simplify the standardization process. Like however, like this the problems begin when the organizations start making compromises that negatively impact the way the business operates, right? So imagine, for example, imagine an organization implementing a new HR platform. So during the implementation, the project team discovers that one of their existing workforce process is not fully supported by the standard configuration. So at this point, they have two choices. The first option is to configure or customize the system to support the business requirement. And the second option is to change the business process to fit the software. So in many cases, the organizations choose the second option because it appears simpler, faster, and less expensive during implementation, right? And initially, that discussion may seem, reasonable, and the project goes live, and the implementation is considered successful, and everything appears to be working. But 6 months later, 6 months later, the employees start finding workarounds. Managers start using spreadsheets. Approvals happen outside the system. HR teams begin maintaining parallel processes. And suddenly, the organization is dealing with a completely different problem in that. So the software is working exactly as designed, but the business is struggling to operate efficiently. So this is something we see very frequently, Sanjeev. So like the organizations optimize for implementation success rather than operational success. And there is a big difference between the two. A successful implementation means the system was deployed, and the successful operation means the business can achieve its objectives efficiently and consistently. And if you want, no, I'm not talking about any other examples anymore because I don't have much time to do that. But anyway, we can go to the next slide. The evolution of workforce intelligence. I think Sanjeevi, you can just start with the stage 1, 2, 3, and 4.
So, just a moment. Just a moment.
Okay. So I'll just explain this. Okay. Okay. So I think for many years, the primary objective of HR technology was to, digitize the process and improve efficiency. Today, the organizations are not just asking technology to process transactions. They're asking technology to help them make better decisions, execute faster, and create measurable, business outcomes. So, if you look at the evolution of HR technology over the last decade, we can clearly see that organizations have moved through multiple stages of maturity. The first stage was reporting. So at this stage, the primary objective was visibility. Organizations wanted answers to a very basic question.
I will take it from here. Sriraj, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, the first stage was reporting, and the question was very simple: what happened? Then came analytics, which was the second stage. Why did it happen? After that came recommendations, right? What should we do next? And this is where many organizations are today. Dashboards available, analytics are available, recommendations are available. But the issue here is that recommendations do not execute themselves. Someone still has to take actions. There has to be someone who needs to coordinate across the teams. And there has to be someone who needs to be present there to move the process forward, which brings us to the next stage, execution, which is where the question actually becomes, starts with the can, right? Can technology help us actually do the work? Can it trigger workflows? Can it initiate actions? Can it reduce manual effort? And can it help resolve issues before they become business problems? And ultimately, the fifth stage comes into play, control. This is where the organizations actually start asking whether my outcomes are improving. Technology becomes invisible here. Nobody is going to ask whether the technology is working. The leaders are going to ask whether outcomes are improving. Again, the questions with can. Can we consistently manage workforce costs? Can we consistently maintain compliance? Can we consistently improve productivity? Can we consistently execute workforce strategies across organization? Can we are the questions that's going to be here, right? Because one of the workforce leaders have put it very well during a discussion, clearly saying, I do not need another dashboard, just that I need very few surprises. And I'm sure that most of you on the call would agree with that. So organizations are looking for technology which is going to help them move from insight to control. I mean, obviously, execution is the middle ground, insight to execution to control, which means that despite all the excitement around AI, there are a lot of organizations who still feel that AI has not delivered the business impact they expected. And this is where we are going to address a question many HR leaders are asking today. When we talk about AI, it means that we are talking about an advanced technology. The question is, if AI has advanced so rapidly over the last few years, why are the organizations still feeling that AI has not completely delivered on its promise? Reiterating, every vendor has AI strategy, every platform has AI capabilities, every conference seems to have at least one panel discussion asking whether AI will change everything. But still, when we speak with HR leaders, the feeling is very different. The response is very different. They say that they're still waiting to see meaningful business impact from AI. Why does this happen? Because there is a very large gap between what AI is actually helping the organizations do today and what organizations actually need AI to do. Right? And this we discussed. AI is good, very good at providing information. If I ask about how many if I ask about my leave balance, answer is immediate, right? They can answer questions, they can summarize document, generate report, provide recommendation. Everything is valuable. But there is a primary difference in terms of helping someone understand a problem and helping someone solve a problem. And these HR leaders feel that AI is still in the phase where it's helping understand the problem and they want AI to solve the problem, right? Yes. And moving to the next slide, which is about how an organization's journey from insight to workforce action happens. Sriraj would be the right person to explain it. Over to you, Sriraj.
Thank you, Sanjeevi. So, I think this is the perfect point in the discussion to talk about what many organizations are trying to achieve today. So over the last few years, organizations have invested heavily in many parts like reporting, analytics, automation, and more recently in AI. However, when we speak with the HR leaders, one common challenge continues to emerge, and that is often a gap between knowing something and actually doing something about it. And this is where the journey becomes important because workforce control is not achieved through insights alone. It is achieved when insights lead to action and actions lead to measurable outcomes, like I said earlier. So let's walk through this journey step by step. The first stage is report. This is where the most organizations started their digital transformation journey. The objective here is very simple: to understand what happened, and then it takes us to the second stage, which is analyze. Now the organization starts asking deeper questions like, why did attrition increase? Why did overtime cost increase? Why is employee engagement declining? So forth and so on. And this brings us to the third stage, which is recommend. So this is where the technology begins suggesting possible actions. Like based on the analysis, the system may recommend increasing retention efforts, adjusting workforce planning assumptions, expanding hiring initiatives, and more. So these are the things that will come under the recommend, and this takes us to the fourth stage, which is act. So this is where the organizations begin converting recommendations into execution. For example, if the system identifies a retention risk, can managers automatically receive action plans? That's a question. Can employee development programs be initiated? That's also a question. So can hiring approvals be accelerated? So this is where the technology starts creating operational value rather than simply informational value. Then that brings us to the fifth stage, which is coordinate. Let's think about a simple onboarding process. HR is involved, the hiring manager is involved, IT is involved, payroll is involved. So facilities may be involved, learning teams may be involved. The process only succeeds when all these stakeholders work together efficiently and effectively. So the same principle applies to the workforce planning, compliance, payroll, employee mobility, and employee experience also. The coordination becomes critical. The organizations need systems, workflows, and increasingly AI capabilities that can connect different teams and processes together. Because isolated actions rarely solve complex workforce challenges. And finally, we arrive at the sixth stage, which is control. And this is where the organizations achieve something much more powerful than visibility and automation. And to the next slide. Anish, the slide title is
workforce architecture.
Okay.
Emerging workforce architecture is a very, very interesting slide. So connecting to workforce control maturity model, we'll just look at the underlying workforce architecture. How should it look like to support the next phase of workforce transformation? Because the future of workforce has to be achieved. Let me put it the other way. It cannot be achieved through a single system, because this is something which many organizations have already realized. And so many years ago, a decade ago for that matter, the goal was always to build a single HR platform that's going to sort everything. Every organization wanted one system, one database, one source of truth, and one user experience, right? But while this vision made a lot of sense at that point in time, the reality is much more complex with globalization and a lot of other changes that's happened in the real world. Organizations are operating across multiple functions, countries, workforce models, and technology environments. And as a result, workforce operations are supported by an ecosystem, right? Not an individual system, by an ecosystem of multiple systems rather than a single platform. A typical organization today can use a system for core HR, a different platform for payroll, another solution for workforce management, for learning, talent management, employee engagement, recruiting, finance, service management, Every department will have different systems, right? So historically, these organizations focused on connecting systems through integrations. The objective was very straightforward: move data from one system to another, make sure that the data remains synchronized, and then reduce duplicate entry, because organizations are looking for something that's more advanced, right? While integrations can be important, the organizations want systems that can collaborate. They want workflows across these systems, which can span multiple platforms. Actions need to be coordinated across functions, right? If an organization decides to open a unit across, unit in a different country, this decision is going to impact multiple teams in terms of hiring, in terms of payroll, in terms of compliance, in terms of finance, in terms of like, as I mentioned earlier, uh, payroll, right? And legal teams, compliance requirements, a lot of things need to be considered. A lot of things need to be considered because these activities have been managed traditionally in a very isolated manner. Every team used to receive information, and each team used to perform their own activities, and coordination was happening only through emails or meetings, spreadsheets, and manual follow-ups. Let's imagine a future workforce architecture. A same business decision automatically triggers coordinated workflows across multiple functions. Let's imagine HR, payroll, finance, compliance, and IT. The result is going to be very encouraging. Information flows seamlessly, tasks are assigned automatically, dependencies are identified automatically, exceptions are escalated automatically, and leaders maintain visibility through the process. This is fundamentally very different from traditional workflow automation, right? This is what we call as coordinated workforce execution, right? And as organizations become more complex, orchestration becomes very, very important. This is also one of the reasons why we are seeing so much interest around AI agents, intelligent workflows, and connected enterprise ecosystems. And the value is not that AI can answer questions. Value is AI can help coordinate activities. AI is not required for gathering information. AI is required to solve issues and problems for the organizations, right? And the future workforce architecture we are talking about is not about replacing HR professionals. It's about enabling an autonomous workforce, right? And human decision making is going to be there, but operational friction is going to be reduced to a large extent. Organizations will be able to execute faster, and coordination will be better. And at QKS Group, we believe that the organizations that will be most successful over the next 5 years will be the ones who build connected ecosystems where data, workflows, people, and intelligence work together effectively. And there are a few key metrics that the CHROs need to monitor. Sriraj, over to you.
As I believe you are probably on mute.
Yeah. So as we discussed in the previous slide, achieving workforce control is not simply about implementing the technology, like Sanjeevi already told, and it is about continuously measuring whether the organization is becoming more efficient, more predictable, and more capable of executing workforce decisions. So, and this brings us to an important question, like how do you know whether the organization is actually improving workforce control? Because one of the challenges many organizations face is that they continue measuring success using traditional metrics. They track system adoption, they track training completion, they track project milestone, and more. So all of these are useful metrics, but they do not necessarily tell us whether workforce operations are becoming more effective. So in our view, CHROs should increasingly focus on a different set of metrics. So the metrics that measure operational outcomes rather than technological activity, right? So the first metrics is uh, workforce process consistency. So this is one of the strongest indicators of workforce control. A simple question to ask is how consistently are workforce processes executed across our organization? For example, does employee onboarding follow the same standards across all locations? Are performance review processes executed consistently? Are workforce policies applied uniformly across business unit? Sorry. Are payroll processes running consistently in every cycle? So when organizations have high process consistency, they typically experience fewer exceptions, fewer delays, and few operational surprises. And ultimately, consistency creates the trust. And the second thing is execution reliability. So this measures how reliably workforce processes perform over time. Then the third metric is integration readiness. So as we did discuss earlier, workforce operations now span multiple systems and functions, like Sanjeevi already mentioned, HR, payroll, finance, learning, recruiting, and all. So the question is, how effectively does information move across these systems? Then the fourth metric is the change effort impact. So this is becoming increasingly important in today's environment. Like the organizations are consistently adapting to new regulations and new business priorities, new workforce models, and new technologies. So the useful question to ask is, how much effort does it take to implement the change? So that's the fourth one. Then the fifth metric is compliance confidence. Historically, this organizations measured compliance through audits and incident reporting. So while those remain important, compliance confidence is broader. It reflects the leadership's ability to trust that those workforce processes are operating correctly. So there are so many other questions that can be asked, like can they trust workforce data? Then can they rely on reporting outputs? Can they anticipate regulatory changes and all? So the main goal is creating confidence in the workforce operations. And finally, the sixth metric is workforce cost predictability. So for most organizations, the workforce cost represent one of the the largest uh, business expenses. So the challenge is not just controlling the cost; the challenge is predicting them. So here also we can ask so many other questions, like can leaders accurately forecast workforce spending? Can they anticipate overtime cost? Can they understand the financial impact of hiring decisions? And there are so many other questions that can be asked. So organizations with high, workforce cost predictability are typically able to make better strategic decisions and respond faster to these business changes. Now, if we look across all six of these metrics, a common pattern emerges. Like none of them focus on technology features. None of them focus on implementation milestones. None of them focus on system functionality. Instead, they focus on outcomes. Because ultimately, workforce control is measured by business performance, not software capability. So that's it from my side. The next slide, Sanjeev will be explaining how the evolution of workforce intelligence and the key recommendations on that.
Thank you, Siraj. So the key recommendations are very simple. The practical recommendations that have really worked for our end users, and which has been the milestone of our consulting experience with the end customers. The first recommendation is to design HR technology for execution. I mean, don't look at it as a reporting tool. It needs to be designed for execution. And the second recommendation is to reduce manual intervention through standardization, right? And the third recommendation is to align the workflows with business priorities, not the other way around, right? So this is where we were talking about AI being able to give information and AI being able to solve an issue for us. That's an example. And the fourth recommendation is evaluate the vendors on outcomes, not on features, right? And finally, please work towards sustainable workforce control. because it is not a project, it's a capability. And definitely the future of workforce control or HR technology is is about making better decisions, execute faster, and achieve better workforce outcomes. If somebody is telling you that the future of HR technology is about more dashboards, reports, or more AI features, please do not take that into consideration. And thank you very much. Coming to the final slide, let me just leave you with, let us leave you with one just a simple message and a key message. When we look at the last 10 years of HR technology, there was a lot of conversation about digitization, replacing manual processes, making sure that new platforms are implemented, get away from spreadsheets and legacy systems. And to be fair to the industry itself has made tremendous progress. There are better systems, better data, better visibility, better analytics than ever before. And the next decade is going to be defined by who can execute better. Because at the end of the day, workforce management is not just a technology challenge, right? It's all about execution. So all we need to do is to make sure that your organization stands out is you're able to execute consistently, adapt quickly, and operate with confidence. And workforce costs are managed effectively, compliance is managed more consistently, and productivity gets improved with reduced friction or less friction. And workforce decisions are made with much greater certainty. And organizations need to have confidence in their workforce organizations, right? Because as a closing remark, there was a CHRO who put it very well during a discussion with us, saying that my goal is not to know everything that's happening in the organization. My goal is to stop being surprised by things that should not be surprises, right? And thank you very much for your time on behalf of QKS Group. We appreciate your participation, and we hope that you found the discussion valuable and look forward to continuing the conversation with you. Thank you, and over to you, Anish.
Thank you so much, Sanjeevi, and thank you a lot for all those who spare those extra few minutes with us. In fact, when we had begun today's session, Sanjeevi was mentioning that, yeah. So when we had initiated today's session, Sanjeevi was mentioning me that we may need to do the session as two different parts. But I'm glad that we were able to share so much insights, and we are glad to have all of you also spare those couple of extra minutes with us. With that, I would like to conclude, and I would like to thank all those who were a part of today's speaking. That is, of course, as experts today, Sanjeevi and Amritraj, Siraj Amritraj, for sharing their valuable insights and practical perspectives on how organizations can align HR strategy, technology, and execution to build more resilient workforce. And to all our attendees, once again, thank you for your time, engagement, and for your thoughtful participation. Do stay updated on our latest research, our insights, our upcoming webinars, and do follow us on LinkedIn at QKS Group. Visit our website to know more about the upcoming webinars that we have lined up for all of you. We have something, since most of the discussion that we had today revolved around AI, we have some AI specific webinars lined up for you. Do check this out, and we look forward to having you in our future sessions. Thank you once again. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Anish. Thanks, Sriraj.